in Marvel Superheroes, there's only two stages that are given to two heroes in this game. One of them is given to Captain America, and his stage is called Ruins at the Statue of Liberty. As you can obviously tell, the Statue of Liberty is somewhat submerged underwater, with the top part above her basically still not, well, obviously deep in the water. But you can still see the big Statue of Liberty herself and still be able to see a background of the city, while I'd like to assume a bunch of scaffolding and a lot of like construction had basically been damaged. So you can pretty much also see a very unique sunset, a little bit of like what appears to basically be like a bit of a bridge in some parts, but overall though, there is just, well, it is exactly what it is. It's literally the Statue of Liberty basically destroyed. Fun little fact, or at least maybe look like a little fun little nod, this actually was somewhat seen again in Spider-Man No Way Home. Now, I'm not gonna 100% say that it's a direct reference or anything, or maybe this is something that the comics did with this kind of setting, but I find it interesting that when No Way Home sort of like introduced the Statue of Liberty, and then the final battle between Tom Holland, Peter Parker, and Norman Osborn, Willem Dafoe, it somewhat brings back the same aesthetic. It's sunset, Statue of Liberty is basically destroyed. I really like the stage. The next one goes to, I mean, it's pretty obvious. It goes to Spider-Man, or Spooderman as people would call him. And this stage is called Scaffolding at the Daily Bugle. But I gotta say, whatever the scaffolding or like how tall this is, because you already see the Daily Bugle immediately from the beginning from this. You see something that says free, but in like, you know, reverse, some strawberries, a picture of a moon, oh no, the globe. And as you pretty much are just fighting whoever you're fighting against with Spider-Man, or in this case, you're fighting against Spider-Man in the arcade mode, you'll see like this little oil barrel that if you basically do a throw, it'll break apart. And you'll see also climbing up that says camera. And what's interesting is that besides the music is that it, as you can see, it transitions in from, well, to midday to evening. And trust me, that's not just the best part about this stage. So what if I told you that this is a stage that not only people at glance will be like, it's a pretty mediocre stage. I mean, it's you just see this, you don't really go anywhere. But oh no, there's more to this than you think. As soon as you start climbing way more high up the scaffolding, you're gonna see a bunch of people behind windows going from, oh dear, go get him, Spider-Man! Beat him up, Spider-Man! And trust me, it gets any more hilarious from here. Like, trust me, it gets more hilarious. Like, you'll see this guy over here on the left, he's like, oh, what's going on outside? As he literally is just pouring like all the coffee out, but it's not actually hitting the mug. I thought that was pretty funny. And then you'll see like this, oh, officer, I need to call 911. Someone's apparently attacking Spider-Man. Apparently there's two Spider-Men in the scaffolding. Please help. And then, of course, you know, you see more people cheering and being scared until you see this. This right here with the music, you gotta understand. Not many people have ever seen this ever extended, because more often than not, when you get to round 2 or round 3, it's either when you get to see the people in the building, but you only will see very little of this. And here's the thing, this will consistently keep going. Now the freaking thing that we were riding on is now going, it's not only going up, now it's going to the left side. And then you'll see a helicopter literally right above these two Spider-Men. Oh, by the way, I can't tell which one is a scroll or a clone. We're not doing this discussion today. But anyway, you'll basically see a helicopter with the reverse letters of MCV. I think I want to give it a guess. It basically stands for Marvel Comic Video, or maybe something like that. But yeah, you get to see this entire view of the city, of the scaffolding sideline. And it's honestly pretty interesting, really. Like, it's such a really nice setting. But like I said, the only thing is that what sucks about it is that you will not be able to see this more down the line, like more rounds, because usually you fight 2 rounds, and by the time that you even get to the final round, it's more likely you only see part of this, but you'll never see the helicopter. And even if you did, you still have the timer to worry about. So yeah, there's no way you were going to be able to see all of this. But truthfully, this is one of my most favorite stages in Marvel Superheroes. In fact, this is my favorite out of all of them. X-Men vs. Street Fighter and Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter basically have what I like to consider as the Ultimate Marvel 3 treatment. So what does that mean? Technically, while they are two separate games, they do have variations of the same stage, except one of them having more detail with one having less. So the first one is known as Showdown at the Park, and believe me, this is also the same name for the Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter variant. Here you can barely see anybody here. There's no people, no any character in sight. You just see a beautiful green scenery, and you just see all around some buildings. But if you're wondering where this is located in IRL, well, I would say an IRL setting, it's Central Park. It's literally just Central Park. There's nothing else that I could absolutely tell you that it's not Central Park. It is. Next, you have Manhattan. Like, literally, they just named this Manhattan. So, aside from the fact that there's a bunch of police cars basically blocking any of the so-called fighters from escaping, a couple of cute little doggos that are barking in the background, you'll also notice that if you basically do a super jump, that the skyline is with a red moon and the buildings are very much encoded in its red area. Pay attention to this, but the cafe and bar sign is a bit different here. It's a little damaged, at least like the "and" sign. It's a little damaged. But yeah, I also want to mention this little cute little thing. Depending on what side you're on, the dogs that are right here, these cute little puppies that are just barking at you, like they're barking at just barking at Bison. If you happen to move them away, say if you're player 1 and player 2 comes to your corner, that dog will bark at you. This dog will literally bark at you. Like, if you keep moving back and forth, he will bark at you. Or actually, you know what? I'll make it even more easier to explain. If you go to any of the corners, and depending on how they kind of notice it, like, look at him. He barks when I get near him, but as soon as I back off, he stops barking. Who's a good little boy? Who's a good little boy? You know what? I want to say a joke about this, but I can't. He would kill me if I say it. But anyway, aside from the good puppers, both left from player 1 and player 2 side, if you happen to do enough damage to the floor, you'll also basically be taken down to a sewer. And yeah, there's really not that much other than the fact that it's kind of murky, there's a light that's happening in the background, but pay attention to that, and also rats. If you like rats, we got them. New York goddamn rats! You goddamn rats! But sadly, no Ninja Turtles, so yeah, you won't be seeing anything different than the fact that the lighting and I would say the color setting for the lights and of course the ambiance is a bit different. So there is just that going on for it. And now let's go to Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter variant of this stage. So again, you may have noticed there is a couple of different things. Instead of a red moon, it's actually a orangey sunset. So yeah, there is technically differences despite that they share a somewhat unique similar stage setting. The only difference is that the sunset is completely different, meaning instead of a red moon with a red glowy night ambience going on, instead it is a sunset setting. And yes, you still see some puppers, and they still do the exact same thing, but like I mentioned before, pay attention to the sign. The sign doesn't look that much damaged, with the bar and the cafe now having a little bit less lighting though. But hey, at least it's nice to know that despite that I'm here in Manhattan, you get to at least see the dog barking.
Doc reads me the Daily Bugle. That Jonah Jameson jerk has got it all wrong about you, kid.
Oh, thanks, puppers.
I don't know if I could also do this in the X-Men vs. Street Fighter variant of the stage, but I also discovered this. If you happen to just throw people in this police car, you could technically also damage the van of the police van right over there. And, well, if you do it enough times, you kind of just throw it out of the way. Like, literally you just throw it out and then we go back down into the sewers. Instead of a yellow, purplish kind of setting, now the light of the sewer is completely blue. You still get them rats though. So, yeah, not that much really of a difference around here. But at least you get to play as Spider-Man and a couple of other characters in this game. So, yeah. And like I said, with the Showdown at the Park variant for Marvel vs. Street Fighter, there is at least some very interesting details here. From the right, you see Rose from the Street Fighter Alpha series. You see Gambit and Rogue basically just having what was supposed to be a romantic day out on a date in Central Park. A couple of citizens that are either fishing or probably just looking for the background. And then you'll notice Charlie basically just enjoying a good book to read. Which is kind of funny because so far only 3 of these characters of the 4 are from the previous game except for Rose. And what's even more funnier is that Charlie is technically a secret character in this game, specifically being known as Shadow, the Shadowloo mind control version out of him. So, kind of funny that he's in here as well. Okay, so just to get this out of the way, Dead or Alive, the show, is also somewhat of a New York stage, at least this variant with Marvel vs. Street Fighter, because of one very particular and very important reason. This guy right there. You notice anything strange about him? You notice the fact that he has a camera, then he has like this weird sense, this tingling? Listen, it's very important to note that if there's anything New York involving any fighting games, and if it involves Marvel, you need to know that that is Peter freaking Parker. Peter Parker literally is Spider-Man. So if you happen to choose any of the other characters that is not Spider-Man, or rather Peter Parker will basically be in this stage, basically trying to take photos, and then as soon as you get near him, his spider sense is tingling. Also, what also adds on to the fact is that Aunt May is just basically sitting there being a bit afraid and kind of like worried. Meanwhile, appears to be Mary Jane just kind of like flop. Also, if you pick Spider-Man, instead of Peter basically being in the background, you'll notice J. Jonah Jameson and Ravi that work for the Daily Bugle, essentially Peter's bosses, and obviously Jonah can't stop for one single day trying to judge Spider-Man, be like, oh, he's a menace to the city! He's hurting that Shoto boy! He is apparently minus 12 frames into his DP! You can't do that, Spider-Man! You're supposed to be minus! Okay, so to make it simple, I basically will critique each of the single variations. I do like the Manhattan version in X-Men vs. Street Fighter. However, I do like Showdown at the Park much better for Marvel's Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. And while Dead or Alive also is something very similar, which what they have with each other also into the 2 games, the fact that Spider-Man is a cameo character, and then there's J. Jonah Jameson, Aunt May, Mary Jane, and Robbie Robertson in that one in Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, I gotta give it to that one instead. So 2-1, Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter, in terms of New York-based stages, have the much more better appeal. But that's all I can pretty much tell you from that instance. And which one is my favorite? I mean, I'm gonna perfectly be honest, I think it's just mostly Showdown in the Park with Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter. It's just, there's more characters. That's all I can just tell you why I like it. It's just, there's more characters. Pretty obvious with the fact that the Avengers headquarters in Marvel vs. Capcom is another stage that is mostly taking place in New York. I mean, if you haven't seen the Avenger movies or anything related to the Avengers, it's always a fact that the Avengers headquarters have always been stationed in New York. But what I like about is that, honestly, I haven't even noticed this for such a long time because, I mean, duh, I'm busy fighting, but there's actually a lot of like references to a bunch of characters, including Beast, who I was basically informed of the fact that it was supposed to basically be one of the playable characters in this game. Other than the fact that you could also see in the background like windows that leads up to an area that you could see in New York, and yeah, I noticed the little details now that you take the time to kind of just look around and not constantly trying to mash a hyper combo or something. But it's pretty decent. I do like that, it's a nice little stage for the Avengers, so it's pretty cool. Next is Rooftop of the Daily Bugle. So now we're in the Daily Bugle aspect again, and you'll see a street that basically says Gold Street, and if you super jump with any character, you'll notice the Four, the Baxter Building, which is the home of the Fantastic Four. And you'll see a couple of cars roaming around and going by. Also, fun little fact, IRL based, if you go to Gold Street, there's actually a Midtown comic store that you can check around and, take a look around into it. So if you're looking for an actual comic store and you want to take a look at some reads, or you want to purchase certain things or certain comic lines, there you go. Now here's a very interesting thing that you'll notice in the middle of Venom. For whatever strange reason, there's a spider web that's surrounding the idea that essentially, if you're able to somehow, I remember this, especially playing the PlayStation 1 version, if you're able to do enough damage to this thing, you could go to the bottom where you'll see like a bunch of a camera and a couple of other things. But for the life of me, I cannot be able to do this. And of course, it's a little hard to kind of just perform, considering that you're not only on a time limit, but you also have to make sure you have to spam consistently throwing down the opponents and, you know, just trying to make sure they get knocked down. I'll eventually figure out a way how to do this, and if there isn't, well, at least I gave it a shot. And finally, the last stage for Marvel vs. Capcom 1 is Manhattan, but this time it's actually Onslaught stage, where you would see, as I mentioned from my top 5 New York stages, you would see parts of Manhattan basically being burned on fire, a satellite on the far right, a big giant body of water, the moon, and everything else. Like, I've already explained this in my top 5, but if I have to, I must. I think this is probably one of my favorite final boss stages, if anything, because, look, you're facing literally an Omega level mutant that essentially has given into hate, and it's not Magneto, it's Xavier. Yeah, technically, from comic fans and like, Onslaught is kind of trash. But for most of us who have played this game growing up from, you know, childhood to now, you gotta understand, Onslaught is a big threat that all of us initially took seriously, considering what he does, what he spams, and everywhere else about it. Plus, a lot of endings seem to feature this stage as a whole. Now, how to access it, on the other hand, is, I don't know. I only was able to access to this through the training mode for this game, so it's a nice little stage that you can definitely be able to basically have fun and basically play against. You know, against your opponent or your rival. But I kind of wish that there was a stage select, because Marvel vs. Capcom in the PlayStation 1 allowed you to do that. But yeah, I think this stage is still one of my favorites. It's honestly, all 3 stages are pretty much my favorites in this game. Before we get to the next game, you might be wondering, why no stages from Marvel 2 or X-Men Children of the Atom? I'll get straight to the point and direct with this. There really isn't any stages that involve or have anything that's New York related. So anything that doesn't closely resemble New York or doesn't really have anything that tells me straight up, oh, this is simply located in New York, it don't really count. So that's why both games don't really have that. Anyway, moving on. For our first stage in Marvel vs. Capcom 3, or rather Ultimate Marvel 3, considering that there was more stages, and essentially Ultimate Marvel 3 is an expansion, we go to the Daily Bugle. Now, surprisingly, the Daily Bugle has gone through a lot of interesting changes over the years, since the first stage that ever debuted was technically in Marvel Superheroes. But anyway, let's take a look at what we noticed so far. There's a parade, there's a big giant float of Spider-Man, there's a poster of Iron Man, there's a Servbot balloon behind, but pretty similar to, well, the scaffolding at the Daily Bugle at Marvel Superheroes. Well, there is a scaffolding, or in this case, an elevator moving around and basically lifting all of our fighters up to the very top floor. As you can pretty much tell, there is a poster for Morrigan. Then, as I mentioned before, there's a more complete version of Iron Man. Then there's the Oscorp logo, the Daily Bugle that's saying since 1897, pizza at 44th Avenue. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to mean 44th Street, but hey, I can't be too judgy. Heroes for Hire, which is essentially, another superhero group that is affiliated with Luke Cage and Iron Fist. There's a poster of Chun-Li, an Internet Bubble Cafe, Rookies Pest Control, I believe that's what it's called. Yep, Pest Control. And then Nielsen and Murdoch, which is obvious, attorneys at law, which is obviously referencing Daredevil. Then there's a logo for Carrie's Castle. The Spider-Man's, balloon seems to have lost control and apparently is now flying a little bit more higher than it needs to be. And of course, a poster of Spider-Man that says, the best Spider-Man photos, contact immediately, hero or menace. Funny fact, before Spider-Man was initially revealed, this was the best way to guarantee to know if he was in the game or not. Then of course you got a poster of Ryu saying, I feel a power inside, what feels or what lies ahead. A poster of Captain America and Hulk, and a little sign that says New York Daily Bugle Festival, with the Daily Bugle logo right on top, and of course a couple of other posters around. And as you basically reach up to the top, you'll notice where Spider-Man is pointing, the Baxter Building, home to the Fantastic Four. I gotta say, this stage carries a lot of interesting details that Surprisingly, the next version of this stage, or rather its nighttime version, carries a little less, but still. And now we go to the night version of this stage, which is known as City That Never Sleeps. One of the very, obvious nicknames for, well, what New York is known for. While the basic platform or the elevator platform doesn't seem to bring us anywhere since it's been deactivated, you'll notice a couple of interesting things here. On the somewhat middle, you'll see a camera, or rather a live TV feed that's basically showcasing Spider-Man and Deadpool fighting against each other. So essentially, people are able to see the fight, despite that they're not able to watch this fight up close. A lot of yellow cabs, like Jesus Christ, there's a lot of yellow cabs. And then, of course, a couple of other, like, as you can see the red lettering, there's like some references, including Dazzler with Felicia. And this is obviously something that, well, literally Felicia does basically do in one of her endings in this game. And of course, a couple of other small details, which is the fact that we're still nearby the Daily Bugle. There's Stark Industries in the middle of a cafe that I like to believe it's right where you see the video. I'm not sure what else is underneath it because it's a little too bright. And of course, Project Feast. Honestly, I kind of like the Daily Bugle much more, considering that it's a little bit more lively and it's just kind of here. Now we go to Metro City. I mean, come on. What did you expect this to not be? This is literally Metro City. Alright, I'll make it easier. So, there's a lot of Mag-Gear gang members, including Andorde and Poison. There's broken police cars. There's police officers trying to tell everybody to get down and stop being aggressive. The very infamous Hagar statue that has been seen around a couple of times in Street Fighter, well, and mostly in Street Fighter 4 up to at least bits later on in the Street Fighter series, has now basically been demolished and has basically been spray painted. With a couple of buildings that basically showcase the, well, as I like to call it, the the project space type area that Metro City has a lot to offer, or in this case, the slums. I mean, you really want me to tell you anything about this stage other than the fact that this is a Final Fight stage, and yes, technically Final Fight is part of New York. I mean, you know what? I'll call it this. We'll just call this stage the Bronx, alright? Like, literally, if you go into the Bronx and you immediately think, oh, okay, there's clearly nothing happening here, this is pretty much what the Bronx looks like. You see a bunch of weirdos and a bunch of crazies going at it for whatever strange reason, and then they'll see like a macho man giving everybody a helicopter ride, especially to an Omega level mutant, a literal Umbrella Corporation douchebag, and Doctor Doom. But now Metro City has converted now into the Days of Future Past, which is literally what the stage is called. Here isn't really that much other than there's two sentinels watching the fight and a broken sentinel down in the middle. But you'll notice a very interesting poster here, and well, let's actually talk about that before I give you guys my in-depth, perspective of everything else. For many comic fans and X-Men fans, Days of Future Past is an X-Men storyline that, well, this is what the poster is referring to. Pretty much almost is a bit identical, with Colossus and Cyclops having the same, and even Rogue having the same position as they were with the poster into the left, with a couple of, well, obvious differences. You'll notice that characters from the previous Marvel vs. Capcom games have either been captured or slain. Heck, you even see Cable, Gambit, Psylocke basically either both captured or slain, and then you got Hayato, Sansan, BB Hood, Amingo, Marrow, Captain Commando, Ruby Heart, Jin, and Hyatt, and well, pretty much almost like a majority here from Marvel 2 has basically been all but killed, except for one character, Mega Man. And let me tell you something, when this poster had shown up when this first debuted, people initially thought that either Mega Man was going to be a DLC character added to Marvel vs. Capcom 3, or this is just Capcom just kind of saying, yeah, we know he exists, but we're just not going to put him in a game because, nah. But yeah, this poster for a while brought a lot of speculation and debunked a lot of possible characters, but nothing really came out after that. So yeah, I really like this stage a lot too. Honestly, I like both versions of Metro City and Days of Future Past because of, well, despite that they take place in the same area, they actually have unique themes going around with it. One focusing on the X-Men and one focusing on Final Fight, which is pretty impressive. And hey, we did get Mega Man as a character. Well, technically as a skin for Zero. Mega Man X to be more precise. I kid you not. Some people were upset that this was a thing. Like, why couldn't we just get Mega Man X as a character? And eventually we did, in the form of Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. Hey, fun fact though, Mega Man X's voice actor in that game is actually the same actor who plays Dan Hibiki. So, yeah, now you know. And finally we go to Shadowland. And I already know what you're going to ask me. Why does Daredevil look like he's doing this best Shang-Tsung impression? Well, to make it simple, Shadowland is, well, literally a stage that is located in Hell's Kitchen, with a majority of the hand ninjas, and of course Daredevil being the leader with the Shadowland costume that he has. But why does he look like that? Well, in the Shadowlands comic line in the Marvel Comics, he is possessed by the Beast of the Hand and is the leader of the Hand. So, yeah, that, in case you're wondering why he's like that. And heroes like Iron Fist and Spider-Man are involved, hence their appearance here. But I gotta say, this stage is extremely impressive. I really like how the layout looks, I really like how the temple looks, and the fact that this is located in Hell's Kitchen is extremely awesome. And now, let's dive into Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite and... okay, this stage, I'm not gonna lie, I absolutely don't like it. I mean, let me be real. Aside from the fact that, hey, there's a little, haha, it's Umbrella, you know, we combined AIM and Umbrella Corporation into one thing because of the dimensional merger that Ultron and Sigma did, and, you know, it's a pretty generic looking stage. Like, look, I get that there's at least couple of little small references and everything, but it would be nice to see some background characters like panicking, or you see like, you know, BOWs going around exiting from AIM Umbrella or something. But the fact that this is a stage, hell, you want to know what's more amusing as a stage? Where in story mode you fight against Symbiote 2 Spider-Man while there's a dinosaur-shaped looking Venom giant dinosaur looking thing. And yet I'm still confused as to why we didn't get that as a stage. Yeah, I know it's story mode exclusive. Hell, there's even some story mode exclusive stages in this game. And we don't get that in this? Yeah, I don't know. Like Frank West, I'm just gonna like not take my time and just immediately get to level 5 and move on. Now we go to the downtown area of New Metro City. And here I can tell you that this is way better than whatever that stage was. So, let's get started. Hey, Venom, I'm gonna need you to come over here. Thank you. Anyway, in the far left, you'll basically see a sign that says Ken versus Iron Fist. If you start the match seeing the player 1 side, when you start doing the character intros, when the match begins, you'll immediately notice that. Then also you see a poster of the Daily Bugle that says Spider-Man, Threat or Menace, which somewhat reminds me of the Ultimate Spider-Man comic covers that I used to see a long time ago in the early 2000s. Hey, that's kind of cool. Then you'll see a statue of Mike Hagar demolished and being spray painted while being replaced as a statue of Damn Thrasher, the Mad Gear leader. It seems Mad Gear is kind of sick and tired of just seeing Hagar's statue all over the place, so they just decided to do that. And considering that the whole Universal merger is a thing, they kind of just decided to do that. In the middle you see the Avengers Tower. On the right you see Captain America doing the We Need You, referencing the Uncle Sam poster for the Army enlistment. Mike Hagar talking to Jonah Jameson in a sign, and Stark Industries. I gotta say, out of all the stages in MCI, I like this one the most. And with that, that is all of the New York-based stages in the Marvel vs. Capcom Versus series. So, before I tackle on a very specific fighting game, I actually wanted to dive into this first because not only is the Capcom Fighting Collection coming up soon, but I also wanted to really dive into it before, into the Marvel vs. Capcom series with all of the stages it has related to New York. And then, there were a lot that I really discovered from looking into all of this. And I had fun exploring into this whole project. In fact, I've been having some fun with this theme for quite a while. But yeah, for real, join me next time as I dive into all of the New York-based stages in Tekken. And who knows, we'll see what we'll go from there. Until then, this is Shockbrawler, signing out.